Hello, Web Summit. Before we get started, Anthony, I thought I would share a few statistics with the audience about where we are currently with the fashion industry. Does anyone in the audience understand or feel that they could give a guess at what the carbon footprint of the fashion industry currently is? If fashion was a nation state, it would be the 7th largest economy in the world. It emits more than 2.1 billion tons of greenhouse gases a year. That's the equivalent of France, Germany, and the UK combined. And yet, Anthony, I was hugely surprised to see that fashion was not in itself on the agenda at COP26. Do you think that the powers that be are giving it due diligence, the scale of the problem that we face with fashion?
I was surprised to learn that fashion had not made the agenda at COP26. It's sort of shocking. So I'm going to ring up whoever set that agenda and ask them if they need any help from us in understanding the scale of the problem. But it's telling we have a long way to go.
Now, you were giving a keynote earlier today about the growth of the second-hand sector in the US. Tell me a bit about the size of the industry as it currently stands, because you had some fairly staggering statistics there about the scale of the issue.
Yeah, so in the United States, fashion resale is today about a $33 billion market. It's growing to about $77 billion over the next 4 years. So it's growing about 11 times faster than retail. And there's a couple big drivers of this. The first is that what used to be sort of something somebody else did, buying used clothing, is now something that people really identify with and is a bit of a badge of honor because it sort of signals that you've found a smarter, less expensive way to look amazing and to get the brands and the products that you want. The COVID experience has also accelerated the adoption of secondhand. We do a bunch of research. We've done a resale report every year for the past 9 years where we survey thousands of consumers across the US. And we were really surprised to learn after our most recent report that 1 in 3 consumers say they actually care more about sustainability issues now than they did before the pandemic. And that was surprising to us, because you would think that when you're in the middle of a pandemic and you're worried about your health and you're worried about your family's health and you're worried about your job, that you don't have time to worry about the planet. But people being contained, many people being contained in their homes for the better part of 2 years, had a lot of time to stare at their closets. And their closets are full of clothing that they're not wearing. If you go by the stats in our report, about 60% of what's in people's closets they don't wear. In the US alone, that's 9 billion unique items that just sit there. And so I think people saw a lot of that stuff and they said, what the heck is going on? I don't wear most of it. That's a lot of money that's tied up. I should have returned that thing 2 years ago when I bought it and it didn't fit, whatever it is. And then I think another big driver over COVID that made people more focused on sustainability is that a virus that came from a part of the world that most of us had never heard of, totally turned our lives upside down. And so the connectedness of the world we're in, the implications of the choices we make for what we buy, I think all these things, including the obvious things like it's cheaper to buy secondhand clothing, people are always focused on value too. All of those things kind of wrapped up to make COVID, in some ways, a multiplier on the adoption of secondhand.
You mentioned at the start of your answer there, the sort of cachet that there is to be found in, oh, this old thing, it was secondhand, you can't have it. But it's almost as though secondhand has 2 identities at the moment. There's the high fashion vintage, and then there's the secondhand thrift store. You need to really search for the gems. How do you make that part as sexy as the first part? And how big a challenge is that for a company on the size of your scale?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it almost depends who you talk to. So if you're a younger consumer, if you're in your teens or in your 20s, the distinction between vintage and secondhand is sort of not as much of a distinction. You know, those younger shoppers find buying secondhand really comes second nature to them. It's just what they do. And if you look at some of the stats from our research, about 50% of the Gen Z cohort has purchased a used apparel item within the past year. Now, as you get older, those statistics change a little bit. There's less adoption as you get older, but it's changing really quickly. So the word is out. I mean, used apparel is on the runway at New York Fashion Week. Stylists who are working with Netflix and who are working with Sex and the City are buying secondhand clothing for the set. It's an advocacy point of pride for celebrities and others. And look, the fact is just millions and millions of people are doing it. You know, so over COVID, I think in 2020 in the U.S., 33 million consumers bought a secondhand piece of clothing for the first time. And so there's still a way to go. And but look, our job at thredUP is to make the purchase of secondhand as easy as possible, so there is no friction, and to make it really easy too for those who have too many things in their closet, make it easy for them to get rid of it. Because as soon as we can sort of unlock that supply that's in closets around the world, the more effective and more quickly we can fuel the circularity cycle that we think will reduce waste, save people money, be good for the planet, and it just feels good too, and it's good business.
How much of that Gen Z attitude to secondhand has been driven by technology and the technologies that we're seeing here? The fact that they're a digital native generation who have grown up through Instagram and Facebook and posting outfits and making fashion a part of their digital identity.
Yeah, so many of you, I'm sure, have heard of a huge trend on social, your outfit of the day. And outfit of the day has come to have kind of a little bit of a mixed connotation to it. It's sort of exciting and fun to have an outfit for the day, but does that mean you only wear it once and you're just creating a pile of clothing waste? So there's a bit of a dual personality too to younger shoppers in that, and it's hard to generalize, but one thing that we note is that there's this sort of desire to do the right thing and to get the looks and the brands and the price that you want. But there's also still a lot of people who buy fast fashion, and some of those businesses are incredibly successful and they're growing very quickly. So, you know, cheap fashion is very alluring to a lot of people, and you can't blame them. They want to look good and feel good and save money. And so it's our job at thredUP to, you know, slowly but surely chip away at that and list great items that people want to buy, have the brands they want, deliver those orders in a way that are speedy and effective, and make them think secondhand first the next time they want to buy. And I'm sure I'll be saying that for the next 10 years or more, but you know, it's a mission that we think is really worth pursuing.
I mean, you talk about the fact that there are still people buying fast fashion, but it almost feels as though at the same time as secondhand is really taking off, fast fashion is almost becoming faster. We've seen the entry into the market of Boohoo Group and Shein and these huge, massive companies that are producing almost throwaway level clothing. What sort of challenge does that present to a company like yours that needs clothing to retain a certain amount of value for it to have a second life, a third life, a fourth life?
Yeah, it presents a couple different challenges. One is will that product be able to be successfully resold? Will it hold up? Will it be worth anything? You know, if it can't hold up after one go in the spin cycle or one visit to the dry cleaner, you know, does it create inputs into the system that aren't as high quality? But I think the brands that people love are sort of getting hip to this. One of the things that came through in our research is that shoppers really are drawn to brands who are willing to sell used items of their own brand beside new items, because it signals to their shopper that, hey, like, we believe in the quality of our product, we're willing to stand behind it even when it's used. And that, I think, should, not overnight, but over time, make producers think a little bit more about the inputs into their goods. And if customers sort of start to think of shopping not as a sort of a purchase where they buy it, wear it, and dispose it, but they buy it, wear it, and essentially then sell it, it should drive market change. But there's still a lot of appeal to to an $11 wrap dress that looks like a DVF dress but really isn't. And so, look, we just have to keep at it, and we have to improve the way that we photograph and attribute even items that are maybe lower quality, so that we can resell them. And look, one thing we talk about at thredUP all the time is, hey, when this really low quality stuff comes in, maybe we should just say to the seller, you know what, like, we're not going to pay you anything for it because it really isn't worth anything. And so there's lots of things we can try to do to serve our customers, but also to show them, like, hey, there's some incentives at work here. If you buy good stuff, it's good for you, it's good for the environment, you can save money, but we've got to give them choices. If those choices aren't there, if you come to thredUP and you're looking for that wrap dress and we don't have it, then we can't blame the customer for going somewhere else.
As things currently stand, how do you value the products that you get in? What sort of metrics do you use to decide how much you're going to offer for a bag of clothes?
So over the past 10 years, thredUP has developed a process and extensive data sets around 35,000 clothing brands, around over 100 categories across those brands. And so when that wrap dress comes into one of our facilities, we can look at it, put some basic attributes into the system, and we can sort of have a sense for what's it worth, what did it originally sell for, and so we can do that across tens of thousands of brands, and it really helps us kind of dial in price, not just on the basics, but of the style elements of it, the desirability of that item as well.
You mentioned the problems that it presents when you get sent clothing that doesn't really have a lot of value, but there must be a lot of occasions where stuff comes in that you cannot resell, and we're hearing from traditional second-hand retailers the problem that they're presented with now with clothing that is not fit for resale. How huge an issue is that for a company that is dealing with millions of garments? What proportion is not suitable for resale?
Yeah, I'd say about half of the things we receive are either damaged or maybe weren't in such great shape to begin with, or have a stain. But the way we think about that is, so over time, our goal is to really accept as much of that as we can, and I'll give you an example. So if an item comes in and it's missing a button, one philosophy would be, well, it's missing a button, the person who gets it is going to be unhappy, let's put it aside and recycle it or do something else with it. But another philosophy is to list it on the site and say it's missing a button. And here's the price for an item that's missing a button. And if you're the type of person that can sew a button, this is an amazing deal. And so I think by us bringing more and more transparency to the quality of the goods to begin with, I think we will identify markets and customers who that's really attractive to. Now, if something's threadbare and it can't be worn, it can't be worn. But, having said that, we also have customers who buy product from us that goes into our, something we have called rescue boxes, which is items that we don't accept, but where you can buy a bunch of things in quantity, and they'll take them and they'll make other things from them. And so, look, we love to fuel that kind of craft culture around textiles, fabrics, materials. And I mean, look, over time, the goal for us would be to have really a kind of a 0% goes to landfills. But over time, we have to refine, well, how do we make consumers want to buy this stuff? And so, but slowly we chip away at that. But look, we've processed at thredUP over 120 million items. So we're off to a good start to make a dent.
You mentioned the fact that consumers have told you that they feel more confident buying from a brand that is willing to sell their own goods secondhand, and that's something you've started to assist them with as well. Tell me a bit about your Resale as a service platform and who you're working with that.
Yeah, so part of our business, in addition to having our own secondhand clothing marketplace where we sell women's and kids' clothes, We also have a part of our business called Resale as a Service, where we work with brands, like we work with Madewell and a couple dozen others now, and we essentially power resale experiences under their brand. So if you go to the Madewell site in the States and you look at their used denim section, that's all powered by thredUP. And this is a pretty amazing development, because brands are starting to acknowledge that their customers want to buy used product and new product, and so they're working with us because we're already processing millions and millions of items from their brand. So if they come to us and say, hey, we want to set up a resale site, we say, okay, how many items do you want? What do you want the pricing to be? And then we capture their brand DNA, so it really looks like their branded site, but we do all the hard work, and they can just plug in and profit from the sale of those items. So it's something we're really excited about, because it puts the tools that we've developed over the past 10 years into the hands of retailers, for them to push resale, for them to educate their customers, and for them to sort of build on the momentum of circularity.
And how much does that incentivize them, do you think, to improve the quality and longevity of their garments to ensure that they will be suitable for second life?
So I'm hopeful. You know, it's sort of too soon to call whether there's real actions going on inside of brands, but I know there's talk. And so talk's a start, and hopefully it'll turn into action soon.
We're running low on time, but I can't be the only person in the audience who's not from the US. When can we expect you to start offering thredUP services in Europe and the UK? Yeah, thank you. So we, about 60 days ago, announced that we acquired a business here in Europe that's going to be our beachhead for expanding thredUP into Europe. And so keep your eyes and ears open, but over time you'll be hearing more about our plans to expand and offer our services across Europe. And so given that expansion, what does thredUP, the company, look like in 5 years' time? 5 years' time. Look, I hope that in 5 years' time, on both sides of our marketplace, whether you're a seller or whether you're a buyer, of secondhand clothing, we've removed all the friction to you participating in that marketplace, whether it's through on the supply side, making it super easy for you to put everything you have in your closet that you're not wearing into a bag. We can process and accept hopefully 50, 60, 70, 80% of it, because maybe you're also being more thoughtful about what you put in the bag or what you buy in the first place. And then on the purchasing side, on the buyer side of the marketplace, look, I think in 5 years, will be a bigger and bigger share of your closet. And every year when we do our surveys, consumers tell us, hey, I plan to buy more secondhand clothing next year. And so we hope that that momentum continues, but we're super optimistic about it. Anthony, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you, Jennifer. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.